All right, hello, welcome back to Unqualified Analysis. You can follow me on the socials at CalebVUA. The link will be down in the description for that. And you can get in touch with the show by either DMing me or going to the email unqualifiedanalysis@gmail.com. However, today, one little fun fact to get us started up here. In 1974, the Buffalo Sabres brass was annoyed by the format of the quote-unquote secret draft. Pretty much exactly what it was. Wasn't televised. Basically just a continuous call between the commissioner and each of the teams. About the most boring possible way to do it. And by the way, the commissioner read out every single name before getting to your pick on the phone. So you can imagine that would take about 5 years to complete the whole thing because there's a million rounds in the NHL draft. All that said, that was held by the NHL. So they decided to play a prank on pretty much the entire league, but specifically the commissioner whose name escapes me right now. They drafted Taro Sugimoto in the 11th round. Taro Sugimoto does not exist. Not a real person, never was. They kept the lie going for years, and some people still believe to this day that Taro Sugimoto is a real person. I mean, they basically just hoodwinked the entire league, including their owner, by the way. I don't think they let their owner in, the owner of the Sabres in on the whole deal here as far as what the prank was going on. But we're back. We're back. A little sports fun fact to get us started today. Today we got the AFC South preview that we're going to do. Going to be a little bit less structured than the other ones because your boy's been busy. Really freaking busy at work. You like that editing? You like that editing right there? We're 2 minutes into the podcast. I can't be letting the go. At this point, got to keep it on a leash. Here in about 8 minutes, won't be a problem. But for right now, got to keep it dialed in. So, yeah, got the AFC South preview coming up. I've not had a whole lot of time, or really any time to work on it because I have been so busy at work. Outside of that, though, I got a couple headlines to get to before we get into all of that. So let's get right into it. It's really not a whole lot that happened this week. I think you might have gotten some news in the NBA as far as extensions. Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race. Outside of that, there's not really a whole lot going on. We're just starting up training camp, man. No news happens when training camp is just starting up, unless there's injuries, God forbid, which, I mean, knock on wood there. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But one thing I missed last week, rest in peace to Jacoby Jones. Always going to be a legend in Baltimore, man. I was growing up in Baltimore, in that area anyways. While this whole thing was going on during that Super Bowl run with Jacoby Jones. For what he did in that Super Bowl, 2 touchdowns, one on a long play on offense, one on a kick return. He's going to be a legend in Baltimore forever, enshrined till the end of time. Not a Hall of Fame player, he'll be a Ring of Honor player in Baltimore on the strength of what he did in that Super Bowl. Also, R.I.P. to Kyrie Jackson. Can't believe I never got to this, especially talking about Jordan Addison's DUI last week, or suspected DUI, just, casually asleep in his car at 11:30 p.m. right outside of LAX. The worst possible, in the middle of the wrong lane of traffic, too. In the left lane. Which is a big old no-no if you didn't know. We're not over there in England. We're here in the United States. And even if it was in England, you can't just be asleep in the lane that you're supposed to be in. Even if it is the lane you're supposed to be in, you're supposed to be driving. But yeah, Kyrie Jackson got killed by a suspected drunk driver a couple weeks back in Maryland. Sucks. Absolutely sucks. Kind of tore up pretty much the entirety of Vikings Twitter whenever it came out, and you hate to hear it. I mean, football is totally at the back of the mind when it comes to that one. Just a complete tragedy, no other way to put it. And then to have like a week later, Jordan Addison coming on in, getting a DUI outside of LAX, or suspected DUI again. You hit the alleged button. It's just dumb. Everyone knows it. Don't really have to belabor the point. I already talked about it enough last week. But yeah, with the context of that whole situation, probably should have explained that a little bit better last week. It's about as terrible of a look as you can ever have as a teammate, a former teammate of Kyrie Jackson. So with that, we move on Brandon Ayuk formally requested a trade from the San Francisco 49ers. Does this mean anything? No. No, not even a little bit. Deebo Samuel requested a trade too, and then he ended up signing a gigantic deal. So I believe Brandon Ayuk is going to end up doing the same thing, unless they're just so far apart on the number that it just ultimately results in a trade. I mean, the 49ers need him, especially with Ricky Pearsall starting. I believe he starts on the PUP list, starting off in training camp. You're going to need your number one receiver out there for sure. I mean, Kyle Shanahan is good. But the reason why the team is so good is because of how loaded the roster is, in addition to the scheme brilliance by Kyle Shanahan. So he's going to be there. He's going to play. I have no worries about that whatsoever. It's just a matter of how ugly it gets, because it could get ugly. And if it does get ugly, maybe that does result in a trade. But that's about the only way that I can see it resulting in a trade at this point. I think Brandon Ayuk's going to be a San Francisco 49ers wide receiver, even if he ends up getting franchise tagged at some point. It's just what's going to happen. That's just kind of how it is. I tend to think they get a deal done. I mean, they did this whole song and dance with Nick Bosa last year. I don't see a trade happening, though. That's the best way to put it. And so much for Shaq Barrett being on the Dolphins. Like I said a couple weeks ago in the AFC East preview, he announced his retirement from the league on Saturday. Dolphins hosted a couple pass rushers, including Yannick Ngakoue, at their facility just today, working them out to potentially sign them at the beginning of training camp. So that's a situation to monitor, more of a depth thing for the Dolphins than anything else, because, you know, Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb are both coming back off those ACLs. You hope they're good, but assuming they are good, we're really just talking about depth here with the retirement of Shaquille Barrett. So yeah, that'll be a situation to monitor. Maybe they've already signed Yannick Ngakoue by the time this episode has come out. Didn't seem like they signed him there today when he was there for a workout, which tells me probably not going to sign him, but something to keep an eye on. Feels like they have a need for another depth pass rusher, so they're going to go some direction with that. We got to see which direction they decide to choose. So with that, that's a quick little run through of the headlines. Let's just get straight into the AFC South preview here, man. I'm trying to make this kind of quick for the sake of y'all, because no one wants to listen to an hour and 40-minute off-season podcast, but also for the sake of your boy who just ended off the workday, after-hours phone call with a client. And have you ever tried to walk a 75 to 80-year-old man through an electronic signature before? So yeah, I was on the phone for 40 minutes. Got it done. I mean, your boy's got no quit in him. I just got that dog coursing through these veins, and I'm not giving up. You got me right on the edge of the finish line for about 10 minutes, buddy. I'm gonna push you over that line if I have to. So yeah, that was fun. That was fun. And now, roughly an hour later, I'm here talking to y'all. So, in the interest of time, I'll stop talking in circles here. Let's talk about the AFC South. Starting off with the Texans. And already went over their free agency pickups during the offseason episode. Free agency's too crazy, man. We'll get into it if they are, big players in the actual depth chart portion of this. But for right now, let's start off with the draft picks. A little draft recap for the Houston Texans. Didn't have a first-round pick. They traded that to the Minnesota Vikings, who then traded up with, I believe, the Jaguars to go up and get Dallas Turner. So, yeah, that's all to say. Didn't have a first-round pick, but in the second round, the Texans took Kamari Lassiter, cornerback out of Georgia. Really solid player. Not ended up in the first round is interesting. It's good value for the Houston Texans here, especially when they still need some players in the secondary. You need a really deep secondary to have a really elite defense, in my opinion. Kamari Lassiter will help. Also in the second round, they got offensive tackle Blake Fisher out of Notre Dame. How about that Notre Dame offensive line? Having Joe Alt drafted in the top 5, then having a second round offensive tackle on the other side of Joe Alt going in the second round. Did I say second round enough? That's crazy offensive line from Notre Dame, and I feel like that's kind of the way they've been for the last, my entire life, pretty much. Besides the point, though, you're expecting him to step up in a big way at offensive tackle. They're drafting him in the second round. In the third round, they got Kalen Bullock, safety out of USC. Should probably be expecting some snaps there, especially with not a thin safety group, but not exactly a deep one either. So you expect Kalen Bullock to get some time back there. In the fourth round, they take tight end Cade Stover out of Ohio State. That's a name you should know if you've been watching college football. He's been catching passes at Ohio State for quite some time. He'll be playing the second fiddle for sure to Dalton Schultz, who they re-signed to a big contract this offseason. But interested to see how he does in that second tight end role. Probably going to be asking to do a lot of blocking, especially with Dalton Schultz being much more of a receiving tight end than a blocking tight end. Cade Stover is going to be asked to do that a lot. So interested to see how he holds up in that role. And then from there, it's all 6th and 7th round picks. If they do well, cool. They'll jump off the screen. You'll be like, who is that person? And the broadcast will tell you when it comes up. But for right now, those top 4 rounds are the big contributors, so we'll stick with that. Let's take a look at the depth chart now that we've gotten through the draft for the Houston Texans. So, obviously, at quarterback, it's Davis Mills. No. It's C.J. Stroud. Come on. So, I mean, no questions at quarterback. An ascending quarterback. He was a top 10 quarterback last year as a rookie. Better weapons this year. I'd say better offensive line. You expect him to be even better this year. Hell, I've still got him picked to win the MVP this year. As much of a crapshoot as that award ends up being oftentimes, that's still my pick for MVP in this upcoming season. So no question at quarterback. Running back, they upgraded with Joe Mixon, and they ended up keeping Dameon Pierce as well. If that offensive line is better this year, boy, they could have themselves a problem in the run game. The wide receiver core, much deeper than it was last year. I mean, Noah Brown's now looking at the 4th or 5th wide receiver slot right there. But at the number 1, they got Stephon Diggs, then Nico Collins, who ascended big time last year, and Tank Dell, who was explosive as a rookie. Great wide receiver core for a great young quarterback. But it all doesn't mean a damn thing if you don't have an offensive line. Obviously, they got Dalton Schultz, too, and then Troy Hairston, who is a fullback. That's all I can really say about that. But on the offensive line, blocking for C.J. Stroud, we got left tackle Laramie Tunsil, one of, if not the best left tackle in the entire league. I hesitate to put him again ahead of Trent Williams, but he's been everything that was expected of him coming out of Ole Miss, and would have been a top 5 pick if not for that gas mask bong video, which is still an all-time surreal draft moment. Because could you imagine if that happened today? I mean, he would not drop one iota. I'll tell you that right now. Would not drop one iota. Maybe 1 or 2 teams would be like, probably shouldn't have taken a video of that. But by and large, you're like, okay, he smokes weed. So does every other player in the NFL pretty much. Bring him in here, buddy. Bring it on in here. We'll have to have a talk about your social media presence, but bring it in here, buddy. We could use a talent like you. So that's Laramie Tunsil. Left guard, you got Kenyon Green, kind of an unproven product. Also, his backup is Kendrick Green, so they're going hard on the green there at left guard. Center, Drew Scruggs coming back for year 2. Right guard, Shaq Mason, who played pretty well at certain points. And then Titus Howard at right tackle, who is another kind of unproven commodity. Overall, it's a better offensive line than it was last year, I'd say, even though it's pretty much the same guys. Continuity. Continuity is a huge thing, especially when you got an elite left tackle like you do. That covers up a lot of your problems. And so long as the interior is physical and they can get push off the ball, I mean, this running game is going to be good. The passing game was already good with C.J. Stroud last year. I think it's going to continue to be good for this upcoming year. I mean, the Texans offense, if they're not a top 10 offense, it's going to be a kind of disappointing year. I don't think Bobby Sloak's going to be looking at a whole lot of head coaching opportunities unless they make a deep playoff run at the end of the day. So top 10 offense is the baseline on this thing. Top 5 is really what they should be gunning for, and they got a real shot to do it. I mean, they're going to be right up there with some of the best offenses in the NFL. If this offensive line is just average, they'll be one of the best offenses in the NFL with what they have at their disposal. So, on defense, again, better than they were last year. Will Anderson coming back for year 2 on the outside. They bring in Danielle Hunter on the other side to bookend. That's going to be a hell of a pass rush. Then you got Jerry Hughes, the ageless Jerry Hughes, waiting in the wings there as well. On the interior, they bring in Danico Autry from the Houston Texans. Hail State, shout out to the boy. Then Foley Fatukasi there in the defensive tackle spot as well. I can't remember if Foley Fatukasi was on their team last year, if he came over from somewhere else, but solid defensive tackle there on the interior, to say the least. I love their defensive line there, man. I think it's a good mix of big uglies and guys that'll get after the passer. I think Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson are just great all-around players. So, I mean, the bookends they have, you could not ask for a whole lot better than what they've got there on the outside. I wouldn't put them among like the best of the best defensive lines in all of football. I'd put them right there at like, fringe top 10 sort of defensive line, though. They are really, really good in that front in a way that they simply weren't last offseason or last season in general, really. In the linebacking core, you bring in Azeez Al-Shaair from the Titans, former linebacker for DeMeco Ryans with the San Francisco 49ers. He's going to be a big up. Another linebacker, Henry To'o. I think he was already there last year, but he's going to be the big question mark there for him. And then you got Christian Harris, who should be asked to play some big minutes as well. Overall, you look at this front seven, certainly top half of the league. I don't think they're quite top 10 on the overall, but anywhere from that, 12, 13, 11 range, I could justify that as a front seven goes. On the back end, Derek Stingley coming back for a third year, I want to say, at this point. Played much better last season under the tutelage of DeMeco Ryans. So I think you expect another jump from him this year. He's going to be asked to be your number one corner, so he better take a big jump. Opposite of him, you bring in Jeff Okudah. If that's your second quarter, I got some real questions. I think they're going to be asking Kamari Lassiter to step up in a big way early. Having Jeff Okudah as your second corner, maybe DeMeco Ryans can bring something out of him that no one else has ever been able to. But man, I'd be real worried if I was a Texans fan looking at Jeff Okudah opposite of Derek Stingley. Not a great setup for him. Good thing is on the back end, they got players to cover it up. You got Jimmy Ward back there coming in from the 49ers. You got Jalen Petrie next to him. Really solid young safety there at free safety. Really good safety core. Again, you don't necessarily have to have a great cornerback group if you have really good safeties. And I think they have really good safeties to kind of cover up some of those mistakes. They're going to have to really break on some routes and get some turnovers, which is a hit and miss proposition, as we all know, but also breakups, all that sort of stuff. I think if the safeties are really good, and if Jalen Petrie takes even another step up more, I think they could cover up for a lot of the woes on the outside there. So on the whole, you think about with DeMeco Ryans coordinating this thing, I mean, top 10's not out of the question. I think that's your reach goal is somewhere in the top 10. I have a hard time seeing this team finishing outside of the top half of the league, though, in defense. That's just kind of my mind on the whole situation. I don't think DeMeco Ryans is going to let them get that bad, and I think the personnel they have, especially on the defensive line, is going to help them mask up some deficiencies in the back end, at least on the outside. Same thing with the safeties there. I just really feel good about this whole unit. So, on the whole, looking holistically at the Houston Texans here, my worst case scenario prediction for them is probably 10-7. Like, so long as CJ Stroud stays healthy, this team is gonna be a playoff team. It's just a matter of where they end up being. Maybe they stumble along the way. Maybe the guys on the back end get burned a little bit. Maybe the offensive line isn't quite as good as I'm expecting them to be. Even then, you're still looking at 10-7. Frustrating season, but still a playoff berth. Top end, I mean, this could very easily be a 13-win team. 13-4 is just, I mean, not out of the question at all. That'd be my best case scenario if the offensive line plays up to snuff. If you cover up the deficiencies on the defense well, and you end up kind of pushing that top 10, got a top 5 offense, top 10 defense. 13-4, looking at a probable 1 seed at that point, unless the Chiefs just go absolutely out of their minds this season, which possible. We'll get to them here in a couple of weeks. I just feel like this team is going to, they've got a really good chance to play some very meaningful football and kind of dominate this season. My prediction, 12-5. I think 12-5 is kind of the place I see them. They're going to probably drop a few here and there, but ultimately they're going to be a top 2 seed in the AFC. It's not an inevitability, but you got a young quarterback stepping up in year 2. Somehow you keep around the offensive coordinator who coached him to the best rookie season we've ever seen. A lot of good continuity. They get better at basically every position on the offense. I just feel like this team is ready to explode to that next level and make a real deep playoff run, deeper than they did last year. I think they could very easily go to the AFC Championship this time around. So yes, 12-5. That is my prediction for the Houston Texans. So up next, we have got the Indianapolis Colts. Finished second place in the division last year. Almost. We're just a hair away from making it to the playoffs in that final game versus the Houston Texans. Obviously, that builds the legend of C.J. Stroud going on the road, getting that win as a rookie. Built different, obviously. He's a stud, but could have very easily gone the other way. And the Colts had at quarterback Gardner Minshew in the year of 2023. That's just simply not going to get you a whole lot of wins. I love Gardner Minshew as a person, as a player. A bit of a wild card. And Shane Steichen coached around him beautifully last year. I think Shane Steichen is one of the best offensive minds in the league right now. So, with that said, let's take a look at what they did this offseason. In the draft, they went with Laiatu Latu in the first round. Slam dunk pick. If Laiatu Latu stays healthy, he is going to be probably Rookie of the Year. He's going to get a bajillion sacks. I think they have a good enough defensive line to where he's going to get a lot of one-on-ones. I love that pick. First defensive player off the board, Laiatu Latu, and I think it's absolutely worth it, especially for the value at number 15. Are you kidding me? He's gonna show up and be an impact player from day one, and I think a lot of people agree with that so long as he stays healthy. Second round, they get a guy that honestly really could have gone in the first round. There were some circulating bad stories about how he had some bad combine interviews. Who cares? Throw on the film. That dude jumps off the screen. Adonai Mitchell. Adonai, I don't know, man. They called him Adonai for like 3 years at college, and then all of a sudden he goes into the draft. We're hearing Adonai. I don't know, man. I don't know for sure, but he's a hell of a wide receiver. I'll tell you that right now, and he is exactly what they need. I think he's going to step in and fill that role that Alex Pierce could not over the last couple of years. He's going to be a physical guy down the field, a real good deep ball receiver, I would say. We'll see how he works out in his route tree. He's got the potential to dominate, though. And if he plays up to his potential, he could be the number one receiver on this team as well, even with a team with Michael Pittman on it. We'll get to that here in just a second. But another great pick there with A.D. Mitchell in the second round. Third round, they go offensive tackle Matt Goncalves. I think that's the way you pronounce it. Get him in the third round out of Pittsburgh. We'll see what kind of role he plays. Center in the fourth round, Tanner Bortolini. And remember this, he had that 3-cone drill. It was like below a certain time. You basically are like guaranteed to start and have a solid career. He led the entire combine in the 3-cone drill, undersized center out of Wisconsin. I think there's a real chance he steps in and starts at some point this season. I really, really like the athletic makeup of a guy like Tanner Bortolini. I don't know who is in there at center now for the Indianapolis Colts. They're a placeholder, baby. You're a placeholder to Tanner Bortolini right now. Watch out for the foul in Italian. Don't think that rhymed, but whatever. And then in the fifth round, you get wide receiver Anthony Gold out of Oregon State. We'll see what role he plays. And then from there, yeah, it's just a bunch of depth pretty much. So that pretty much sums it up. For the depth chart here, quarterback, we got Anthony Richardson coming in for year 2. Got to stay healthy. Showed some real flashes when he was healthy, though, man. And I think of the world of him, especially with Shane Steichen as his offensive coordinator. I think if he stays healthy, boy, this thing could be really interesting regardless of what the offensive line looks like. But behind him, worst case scenario, you get Jay Flacco in there, and he's going to be slinging that pill deep like he always does. You know, that's my Baltimore accent. I think I did an okay enough job with it. Yeah, if all else goes wrong, Anthony Richardson goes down, Joe Flacco, You saw what he did last year with the Browns, right? He can do that exact same thing this coming year because he's still got a live arm, and that's really all you need from him. So solid group of quarterbacks that they've got there with the Indianapolis Colts. Running back, you got Jonathan Taylor as the starting running back, and just hope he doesn't get hurt because your second string is Trey Sermon right now. So let's hope Jonathan Taylor stays healthy for the rest of time, huh? That's what the Colts are thinking right now. And then you look at wide receiver. You got Michael Pittman Jr. there as your number one, really solid guy. Not the greatest receiver in the NFL, but certainly a number one caliber receiver to say the least. Second wide receiver right now, you got Josh Downs, who exploded on the scene last year as a rookie. I think if he had, not Gardner Minshew, if he had Anthony Richardson the full season, I think he would have gotten to that 1,000-yard mark. Then number three, you got Adonai Mitchell right now. A.D. Mitchell as your number three receiver. I think he's going to step up in a big way this year. At tight end, you still got Jelani Woods, massive human being, just a giant of a man out there at tight end playing football for him. Looks like he should be a basketball player, but at 6'8", probably better to play football anyways. He's there at your tight end. And then you got Alex Pierce, kind of lurking there at the fourth wide receiver. Really solid receiving group. I mean, better than they were last year. Still not really creeping up to that top 10, but solid middle of the pack. Probably closer to the top half of the league than the bottom half of the league, but right there, middle of the pack. If Josh Downs takes another step up, if A.D. Mitchell is better than we expect him to be in year one, could easily vault even higher. But that's where I'm looking at him right now, is right in that middle tier of receiving groups. Let's look at the offensive line. You got left tackle Bernard Raymond. Left guard stud Quentin Nelson, center Ryan Kelly, the placeholder for Tanner Bortolini, right guard Will Freeze, and right tackle Braden Smith. And not a group that's done fantastic over the last several years. Been pretty inconsistent, especially with that final year under Frank Reich. Just didn't look great. They looked okay last year though, and especially with Shane Steichen in there, I think you're going to see a big bump going forward. Outside of Quentin Nelson, there's not really a guy that scares you on this offensive line. Braden Smith's been there forever, so he's solid enough at right tackle, obviously. But outside of that, not really a whole lot of guys you look at and say, I'm scared of that guy on that offensive line. It's kind of a work in progress still. Probably lower middle of the pack, with the exception of Quentin Nelson. Without Quentin Nelson, this thing might be a total disaster. But since you have Quentin Nelson in there, that certainly helps. Probably puts him more in the middle of the pack. That's just kind of where I'm looking at it. I think this offense on the whole, though, could push top 10. I just think that highly of Shane Steichen. I think Shane Steichen in combo with Anthony Richardson is going to be dynamic. And you got Jonathan Taylor and those receivers. I think you're going to make it work with a good offensive mind. I feel like they're going to be top half of the league. They're going to be pushing top 10 so long as Anthony Richardson is healthy. And hell, even if he's not healthy, Joe Flacco comes in there. I feel like he could keep this offense running if Anthony Richardson does, unfortunately, go out at some point here. So I love the makeup of this offense. I love what they're building. Still probably a year away from being on that elite tier, rebuilding-wise, but they're looking good with what they're starting with here in year two. So I'm looking on the defensive side now. Defensive end, you got Kwity Paye with Samson Ebukam on the other side. And you got Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner there in the middle. Laiatu Latu, not slated to start right now. It's going to change at some point. Mark my words. He's either going to take Ebukam's spot. He's going to slide in there at defensive tackle. He's going to do whatever he has to do. I think Latu's actually kind of an undersized guy, so maybe not defensive tackle. But he's going to find his way into that rotation on the outside, and I think he's going to take someone's job by the end of this. I don't know who it's going to be. He's going to take someone's job, though, because he's just that damn good rushing on the outside right now. And then at linebackers, you got E.J. Speed, Zaire Franklin, stud, and Cameron McGrone, who I do not know who that is. Simply don't know who that is. I apologize to that man. So Zaire Franklin is a stud. E.J. Speed is solid enough. I've at least heard his name before. Last name's Speed, too. You can't get much better than that. With the Cameron McGrone there, I'm a little hesitant. I mean, it's a middle of the pack front seven, to say the least. I think they're solid enough. The front four is really good. Zaire Franklin's really good, so they're probably top of the middle of the pack, but still probably more middle of the pack. I don't think they're up there with those best front sevens in the entire league right now. And I honestly think they would have to be to make up for the back end here. Kenny Moore is a stud. Leave him to the side right now. He's the nickel back. But outside of that, you got Juju Brents, really banged up last year. You didn't see a whole lot of him. At one cornerback, you got Jalen Jones at the other cornerback, another young guy who kind of got cooked last year. Got Nick Cross and Julian Blackman on the back end. They got some real question marks here right now on the defensive side of the ball. This is the makings of a mid-20s sort of defense. Maybe you push it up into the teens if the pass rush ends up being dynamic and kind of offset some of that. But you want to talk about a work in progress. They got to go hard on that secondary here in the coming years, or elsewise they're going to run into a Chiefs or a Texans or a Bills or really anyone with a great quarterback, and they're going to get sliced, diced, and served on a platter at the end of the day. So holistically, looking at this entire team, worst case scenario I see for them, probably 8-9. I don't think they're going to be that bad. I don't think they're going to be great, but I don't think they're going to be that bad. I think their floor is real high, just based on the personnel and the coach that they have. Because I do think the world of Shane Steichen as a football coach, as an offensive mind, all that sort of stuff. So 8-9, I feel like, is the worst case scenario, and that's, again, not including injury. If Anthony Richardson stays healthy, I think he's going to be good enough, and Shane Steichen's going to coach them well enough to where they're going to squeeze 8 wins out of there. You just might not know where they're coming from. A lot like I don't want to compare him to Mike Tomlin, but a lot like the Steelers have done over the last several years. Best case scenario, I mean, you roll the dice, you get a few lucky breaks here and there. Could be an 11-win team, 11-6. I feel like the offense could be in the top 10. The defense could be top half of the league, kind of pushing that top 10 a little bit. Wouldn't be shocked at all if they reeled off 11 wins, especially if Anthony Richardson turns out to be taking a real leap in year 2 as far as his reading and his accuracy, all that sort of stuff. I don't think it's likely, but I think it's as a best case scenario, 11-6, not out of the question at all. My prediction, 10-7. Right there in the middle, towards the top. I think they're going to be right there in the playoff picture for sure. I think they should be a playoff team this year. Again, I love the makeup of the running game in particular. They might be, especially if Anthony Richardson stays healthy, they might be one of the best running teams in the entire NFL with what they have in the backfield. And you'd hope with running behind Quentin Nelson, you get a good yard per carry average there as well. But just the brilliance of the scheme of Shane Steichen, I love what they're doing there. I just have some questions about the defense. I love the makeup of the pass rush, but that back end, boy, it scares me. It scares me a lot, and I think that kind of holds them back to 10-7. Still, really solid progression from where they were last year. So nothing to hang your head about a 10-7 after coming off of last season. So. Moving forward here, we're looking at the Jacksonville Jaguars here. So in the draft, you get wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. in the first round, which didn't make a whole lot of sense at the time, but I understand it. I get it. Probably would have gone cornerback in that situation, but Brian Thomas Jr., I think he's going to be good. Support your young quarterback. He's trying to make that leap to that really good status. Really good to great status. I think he's right on the cusp of really good right now. If he gets a little bit better receiver play, and maybe Brian Thomas can accomplish that. I think he's a crazy fast wide receiver for sure. I think he's going to feature heavily at certain points in this season, especially as a deep option, because there's really no one else in that receiving core that really brings that sort of juice that Brian Thomas has. But we'll get to that more in just a little bit. Second round, another LSU player. They go defensive tackle Mason Smith, who LSU tried to change their entire season around so they'd have Mason Smith in the first game, and lo and behold, they got blown out. Not that LSU's defense improved a whole lot with Mason Smith back in there, but they tried to change around their whole start of the season just so they could have Mason Smith in the lineup because he was suspended for one game to start last season. He should feature pretty heavily on that defensive line. I think defensive tackle especially, they could use him in there. On the outside, you're looking good with Jonathan Allen. Not Jonathan Allen. You're talking about Josh Allen. I don't know why I thought Jonathan there. That's the defensive tackle for the Washington Commies. But Mason Smith, interested to see how they use him this year, especially with new defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen coming in there. That'll be very interesting. Third round, they get cornerback Jerrion Jones. Finally, a cornerback at long last. They bring one in, and he'll probably play right away because they don't have a whole lot in the way of secondary help back there. We'll get to that here in just a minute. And then in the fourth round, they took offensive tackle Javon Foster out of Missouri. He'll probably play right away with how bad that Jaguars offensive line is. And defensive tackle Jordan Jefferson, also out of LSU. Very LSU-heavy draft there in the first 4 rounds. Outside of that, I mean, they got Keelan Robinson, running back from Texas. He might play at some point, but you got Travis Etienne there, so probably not a whole lot. And you just drafted Tank Bigsby last year, so they're just obsessed with getting a new young running back every year. Bringing the new model, as they say. So yeah, there's your draft. Not terrible, but just didn't really address some of the biggest needs, which could be worse, I guess. You would kind of let it off the hook a little bit if it wasn't Trent Baalke, but it was Trent Baalke, folks. So you can't just assume that he understands or knows what he's doing at any given time. So looking at the depth chart here, we got Trevor Lawrence as starting QB, obviously with Money Mac Jones backing him up. I think Mac Jones is going to fit into that backup role nicely. I'll just put it that way. He's going to fit nicely. Going to be a great study partner for Trevor Lawrence. And hopefully that keeps him around the league for a long time because his starting attributes weren't great. Okay, so in the backfield, you got running back Travis Etienne as the starter, Tank Bigsby as the second string. Forgot they brought in Dearness Johnson last year. He's the third string, clearly. And then Keelan Robinson's all the way down there at the fourth string. Maybe he'll return kicks. Who knows, though? I'm pretty sure they got Jamal Agnew still there. So, wide receivers, you got Christian Kirk as the number 1, Gabe Davis, who they bring in free agency, as the number 2, Brian Thomas Jr. as the number 3, and actually brought in Devin Duvernay from the Ravens. That's the one. He'll probably be the one returning kicks, actually. He's a dynamic kick returner. Look for him to maybe, playing a little bit of a gadget role there as well on the offense. And especially with Evan Ingram at tight end, one of the better receiving tight ends in the whole league. I like the makeup of this receiving core. Actually, it's got some youth in it. It's got some experience. Got some different complementing skill sets to a certain extent. Although Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis, they both kind of just run the run straight playbook. So Christian Kirk works the middle of the field well, though. Really solid slot receiver at the end of the day. I really like this receiving group. Probably just about same level as I did last year with Calvin Ridley, I would say. I like the makeup of what they've got in the room right now. Would I put them top 10? Nah, but right there, maybe right around 10, 9, something like that. They're a really good receiving group. On the offensive line, though, that's where the problems come in. You're starting Cam Robinson at left tackle, who's been better, so give him credit where it's due. Then you got Ezra Cleveland starting at left guard. He does kill people, but he's not a very good offensive lineman, unfortunately. Center Mitch Morse, he comes over from the Buffalo Bills, slots in there at starting center with the Jaguars. See if he has anything left in the tank. You got to hope so, because you're starting Brandon Scherf at right guard, which, woof. And then right tackle Anton Harrison, which, not so sure about all of that. Clearly a bottom half of the league offensive line. You hope that Trevor Lawrence doesn't get absolutely killed this year. They're not as bad as the Giants, so I'll give them that. They're not very good, though. Not a very good offensive line at all. Cam Robinson's probably your best player, and if Cam Robinson's your best player, that's a crying sign, just a flashing neon sign that says help. That's what that is right there. On the whole, you factor in the fact that Press Taylor is still calling plays there for the Jaguars. I think this is a middle of the pack group. I like the skill personnel, if nothing else, but the offensive line's not good enough. I don't think the play calling is good enough. It's going to be a tough road to hoe, if you will, for this offensive group. I think they're just kind of middle of the pack. I think they probably should be a little bit higher if they had better coordination, but I just don't really believe in Press Taylor as an offensive play caller at this point. Maybe he proves me wrong. Hope he does for the sake of his career going forward. I just don't. You're going to have to prove it to me. That's the main thing. You're going to have to prove it to me this season. On the defensive side of the ball, Looking at Eric Armstead, who comes over from the San Francisco 49ers. Devon Hamilton at nose tackle. Roy Robertson Harris as the defensive end. I think Robertson Harris came over from the Chargers, I want to say, in the middle of last season. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else here. But not quite the interior you're used to from this defensive line. I don't know where Javon Hargrave is in that whole thing. What am I talking about? I totally forgot that I was talking about the Jaguars. I thought I was talking about the 49ers for a second. You talking about Javon Hargrave. No, this is the Jaguars, folks. I can't believe I just did that. I can't believe I just did that. I just saw Eric Armstead and just immediately, whoop, right into the 49ers. Wow, that was crazy. That was crazy what I just did there. But yeah, not a great defensive line, really. I mean, Eric Armstead's a solid enough player, but I don't know. It's a bunch of like okay to solid players and no like great players in there. So lower middle of the pack, I would say, for that defensive line. You hope Mason Smith steps up. You hope Jordan Jefferson steps up a little bit as rookies and kind of shows something for you. But that's kind of the best case scenario for you. On the outside, you have got Josh Hines. Josh Hines Allen. When did that happen? That's Josh Allen, not the quarterback, the defensive end, the one that got paid like $30 million a year this offseason. He's there. He's absolutely there, and he's got a Hines in his name now. How about that? Great catch-up. I'll tell you what. So he's on one side. You got Travon Walker on the other side. You're going to need a big jump from Travon Walker this year to really justify that number 1 overall pick. He's already kind of a bust based on where he was drafted. He's going to have to show you something this year if he wants to stay on the team, though, because he's been solid to okay at the best of times and not very good at the worst of times. You're going to need a big jump from him this year. And then on the inside, you've got Foye Oluokun, stud. Devin Lloyd played pretty solid last season. Overall, you look at this front seven, and you just kind of see, like you love Josh Allen. You absolutely love to see Josh Allen there. You love to see Foye Oluokun. Again, stud. I mean, just a tackling machine. He gets like 170, 180 tackles a year, it feels like. He's a stud. He's insane. Outside of him, though, outside of those two, Josh Allen and Foye Oluokun, not fantastic. They're okay, not fantastic. Again, probably lower middle pack as far as the defense goes. Oh, not the defense on the whole, but I mean in the front seven. Maybe I'm being a little too harsh on him. Maybe Josh Allen kind of brings that up to kind of middle of the pack, but I just don't feel great about this group that they have in there right now. I am being too harsh. They're probably right there in the middle. They're not in the 20s. They're certainly not in the top 10 or really approaching that, but they're right there in the middle right now. On the back end, though, well, you got Ronald Darby and Tyson Campbell on the outside, or Tyson Campbell, I believe. Antonio Johnson and Andre Sisco on the back end. Darnell Savage in the nickelback. That's an upgrade, I suppose. If nothing else, they're more talented than the Falcons last year. I'll say that. I feel like they have a few more solid players than the Falcons did. And you bring in Ryan Nielsen. You can make up for some deficiencies in the back end, but there are some deficiencies in the back end. Don't get me wrong at all. Don't get it twisted. This is a deeply flawed secondary right now. But with Ryan Nielsen in there, honestly, I think this defense goes like middle of the pack. I don't think they're in the 20s. Maybe they're in the top of the middle of the pack. I don't know. I feel like they're somewhere in the teens, though, at the end of the day. I think Ryan Nielsen's a really good defensive coordinator, and I think the bias against defensive minds when taking head coaching jobs, I think that's probably going to benefit the Jaguars in this one because I think you're going to have Ryan Nielsen there for a couple of years. So I like the coordination of this defense. I like a few individual pieces they have on this defense, and I think Ryan Nielsen's going to take advantage of that and do a little bit better than maybe the personnel would dictate in this situation. So, what is my prediction for the Jacksonville Jaguars this year? Best case scenario, or we'll start with the worst case scenario: 7-10. Easily 7-10. If the offensive line falls apart, if the back end is just a complete and utter liability, this team's not going to be very good. I mean, no matter who you have on the outside, no matter how good Trevor Lawrence is playing, you can't throw the ball if you're on your ass, and that's going to be the problem. And the defense, I mean, hey, if the secondary is just getting burned right away, it doesn't give the pass rush a whole lot of time to get there. You're going to have to get there quick in order to make up for those mistakes in the back end. Again, there are some deep flaws in certain key areas of this team where at the end of the day, if something goes wrong and if they are the worst they could possibly be, this team's not going to be very good. Best case scenario, I mean, maybe 11 wins. I'd more lean towards 10. I don't see this team having that breakout potential this year. I mean, maybe if Trevor Lawrence turns out to take that big leap that everyone's been waiting for and become an elite quarterback, maybe he gets in there with the strength of the receiving core. Maybe Josh Allen plays well. I don't know. I just don't see this team finishing better than like 10-7. That's kind of my ceiling for them, and I'd love to be proven wrong, man. I'm wrong all the time, but I feel like I have a good read on this team, and they're the Jaguars. They're better than they have been, but they're still at their very heart the Jaguars, run by Trent Baalke. So that's kind of where I'm at with them. My prediction, 9-8. I feel like they are a 9-8 football team. They got some deep flaws that are going to hold them back a little bit, but they got some good bright spots on both sides of the ball that are going to win them a couple of games and kind of get them to a semi-respectable season. But I don't think nearly what the expectations that are being set internally, I don't think they're going to be met at the end of the day. So 9-8. I feel like they're probably like right on the cusp of the playoffs, probably on the outside looking in when you really look at it. But that's my read on them. Get a quick drink here real quick. I'll tell you what, the throat is parched. Spend the whole day talking on the phone. Then you come in here and you just start yelling in your closet. Boy, that'll put some wear and tear on the old pipes, if you know what I'm saying. Okay, so last one we have got here, the Tennessee the Titans, excuse me. So let's look at their draft here real quick, if I can ever pull it up. They start off in the first round with offensive lineman, number 7 overall, J.C. Latham. To bring in, obviously, you bring in Brian Callahan as the head coach. He brings in Bill Callahan, who's maybe the best offensive line coach in the NFL right now, to coach that offensive line. They were a bad unit last year with some bad free agency pickups and draft picks. This year, at the very least, you had one bright spot. Peter Skoronski played very well as a rookie. He's going to slot in there again. You bring in J.C. Latham there in the first round there to, ideally put out there at left tackle. And he looks like an absolute freaking monster. I mean, he is bigger and more athletic than any human should have any right to be. That's the best way I can put it. It's amazing to look at a man of that size, especially without pads on. You really get the full sort of context for just how enormous that J.C. Latham is. And with a coach like Bill Callahan, you got to be excited if you're a Tennessee Titans fan about that draft pick. Second round, staying with the big boys. They got Tavondre Sweat there on the interior. You ideally expect him to slide in next to Jeffrey Simmons. Hopefully somewhat make up for losing Danico Autry. You don't expect Tavondre Sweat to be that guy right away, but a giant dude there on the interior. Just a giant of a man plugging up the middle of the defense. That's exactly the way I like to see it. Plugged up, no running holes there whatsoever. I don't know how I just kind of, just seamlessly went into the Trump impression, but we're there. We're there. Yeah, I like that draft pick as well. You needed someone to kind of, fill somewhat of the hole that Danico Autry left there. I hope I haven't been vague enough on that one. In the fourth round, you skip ahead. You get a linebacker, Cedric Gray, out of North Carolina. And then from there, it's, bunch of depth pretty much. So with that said, let's take a look at their depth chart right now. Coming in at QB, second-year guy, Will Levis there. Who the hell knows, man? Who in their right mind knows? He played behind a terrible offensive line last year. He had a couple, bright spots here and there. It basically shows you exactly what he showed in college, just electric arm talent. Every once in a while he'll make a throw that just tantalizes you, and then sometimes he makes the worst plays you've seen in your entire life. And some of that is due to the offensive line. Some of it was due to the bad receiving core. That's not going to be a problem this year. You got a good one coming up for this one we'll get to here in just a second. But a lot of the direction of this team this season is going to hinge on that man, Will Levis. Is he going to be good this year? This is really, it's coming up early, but this is really kind of a prove-it year for Will Levis, I would say. If he doesn't show any sort of progression from year 1 to year 2, I think they're very, very much going to be looking for new quarterbacks going forward. Maybe the lack of strength in next year's quarterback class, relatively speaking, kind of dissuades that a little bit. But hey, this is a put up or shut up year for Will Levis. You got all the tools you need ahead of you as far as the receiving core goes. Go out there and make it happen. Running back, again, Tyjae Spears is the backup. He was the guy they drafted last year who was dynamic in spurts behind Derrick Henry. Then you bring in Tony Pollard from the Cowboys. Really solid player. Kind of dropped off a little bit last year. And this offensive line is a work in progress, to say the least. So you hope that at the offensive line plays well enough to allow Tony Pollard to work. But that's a really good pickup there. That kind of, you don't get a whole lot of drop off from Derrick Henry to Tony Pollard at the end of the day. You get some, obviously, with how good Derrick Henry is, but not a whole lot of drop off with Tony Pollard. And then you look at the wide receiver core. Calvin Ridley comes in from the Jaguars. DeAndre Hopkins is back from last season. Tyler Boyd comes in from the Bengals. That's a really, really good 1-2-3 that they've got right there. That's a fringe top 10 sort of 1-2-3. Chig Okonkwo at tight end. Jury's out. He's fast. He's a really, really solid athlete. I don't know how much you're expecting him to take a leap in the receiving department, but maybe you can use him in more of a gadget role. Maybe he breaks off a couple big plays with that speed. That's the best you can ask for him. But, you look at that 1-2-3 at wide receiver with Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd. I think the only thing holding them back in the overall receiving core rankings is that tight end right now. And outside of that, it's a good group. Treylon Burks is your fourth wide receiver. Granted, he hasn't been everything that maybe we expected coming out of Arkansas, being that first-round pick a couple years back. But as a fourth receiver, you could do a whole lot worse than Treylon Burks, man. Especially with all the things that he can do. I love this group of receivers. They're not sexy. They are sexy for sure. Not talking about their looks. I'm talking about their play styles here. But not the deepest group in the world, but a really solid group nonetheless. I like what the Texans put together. I like what Ran Carthon did with this team this offseason in the offensive category. Then you look at the offensive line. You got left tackle J.C. Latham coming in, who expect big things from. Peter Skoronski slots in there at left guard. You bring in Lloyd smoking that good Cush. Cushenberry out for free agency. You pay him big money to be your new center. Daniel Brunskill is back, and then Dylan Radunes on the right side. The right side is the one that's going to scare you for the most part. Left side and center should be all good, just based on the players that you brought in, what you paid him, the draft capital you used to draft the guys on the left side. You got to feel good about the left side. The right side, you hope. You just hope that Dylan Radunes and Daniel Brunskill can hold it together on that side of the ball. Solid sort of middle of the pack. I think they're better than the Jaguars, but not really pushing that that really good status. I think they're okay. They're solid. They're not right on that that fringe, the high teens, if you will. I think they're right there in the middle. I have such a hard time predicting what this offense is going to do this season, because Will Levis, who knows what he's going to be? No one really knows what Will Levis is going to be this year. It could be fantastic. Like this season, like the offensive production, the ceiling and the floor are about as far apart as any team in the entire NFL, and it's just based off of that. What is Will Levis going to be? Like, if he turns out to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league this year, or at the very least kind of pushing top 10, certainly, top half of the league sort of status, this offense could be fantastic. I mean, really, really good with what they already have in place. If the offensive line plays well, I apologize for kind of just getting in my ear right now. It's itching so bad, and it's probably disgusting to look at, and I do apologize for that. But it just has to happen. It's annoying me so much. But back on topic here, I could also see this offense really finishing badly if Will Levis is bad. Like, they could finish in the 20s or really towards the bottom of the league if they end up being bad at quarterback. It's just, I have such a hard time predicting it. I mean, optimistically, I'd say they're probably like middle of the pack. You got to find some happy middle ground, but it's not going to be like a consistent middle of the pack offense. Some weeks are going to be great. Other weeks, Will Levis is going to be terrible, and they're going to be terrible. So, like, it all just rides on the ebbs and flows of quarterback play at the end of the day, and I think that kind of averages out somewhere as, well, average, pretty much. And then looking at the defensive side of the ball, as I thought, T'Vondre Sweat's slotting right in there at nose tackle there next to Jeffrey Simmons. You bring in Sebastian Joseph Day. He's the one that the Chargers cut. Then he goes over to, I believe, the 49ers. Now he's with the Tennessee Titans, now starting on their defensive line. Wild odyssey over the last year or so for old Sebastian Joseph Day. But that 1-2-3, Simmons, Sweat, Sebastian Joseph Day, if T'Vondre Sweat just ends up being the massive human being who can just take up space that we expect him to be, that's as good of a 1-2-3 in a 3-4 scheme as you can ask for right there. That's really good what they have in place. One of the best defensive tackles in the entire league. Solid young guy, solid veteran there as well with Sebastian Joseph Day. I love that front three. On the outside though, gets a little bit dicey. Harold Landry, what's he still got left in the tank? We're gonna see. Then you get Arden Key on the outside as well. I don't feel great about that. Then you get Kenneth Murray in the middle, who's never lived up to that first round billing coming out of Oklahoma. And then Jack Gibbons, who I frankly don't know who that is. I apologize to that man. It's no Azeez Al-Shaair. That's the main point here for both of those guys, both Murray and Gibbons. So, I mean, I think the front three is going to just do some nasty, nasty work up there. That's going to help out the pass rush and the linebackers. Linebackers kind of hold them back, though, because if you get that second level, I don't feel good. I don't feel good about this defense when you get to those interior linebackers for sure. I think T'Vondre Sweat, at what you're hoping he's going to be, is going to cover up that a little bit, but it still worries me. It still worries me for sure. And then on the back end, you got Cheeto Awuzie. Love that pickup coming over from the Bengals. And then on the other side, you bring in L'Jarius Sneed from the Chiefs. That's as good of a 1-2 as you can ask for in the NFL right now, man. That's really good stuff right there. And then on the back end, you got Amani Hooker and Elijah Molden, Roger McCreary slotting in there at, well, the slot, the nickelback corner position. Overall, I'm fascinated to see what this defense ends up being, because I think they have some really good players. I think, obviously, Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry at his peak, both studs. L'Jarius Sneed on the back end. He comes from a situation in, I can't remember where he came from. It might have been the Texans this last season. The defensive coordinator, whose name escapes me right now, had one of the lowest blitz rates in the entire league last year. Maybe I'm thinking of the Giants right now. What am I talking about? So I don't know what to expect from this defense, quite frankly. I feel like they have some good pieces, but they got a few holes here and there. I don't know. I think they're going to be top of the middle of the pack, though. It's hard to see them being top 10 with the stuff that they have that's kind of wrong with them. But the good players they have, especially on the outside and in the interior of the defensive line, I think it's good enough to really kind of propel them to a better than average group. Maybe not quite pushing that top 10, but a better than average group for sure. So, with that said, my prediction, worst case scenario for the Titans, they could be, if Will Levis is bad and those linebackers get absolutely kind of tore up there in the middle, if T'Vondre Sweat just isn't what you expect them to be, could very easily be a 6-11 football team. That's definitely in the cards here if everything goes absolutely wrong for them. On the flip side, best case scenario, sneaky 9-8. Like they're not terrible. They're better than they were last year. Like they didn't go into the offseason saying, hey, we're going to get right back to the Super Bowl contention, to that 1 seed that we were at that 1 year. But they committed themselves to bringing in really quality players in free agency. They committed themselves to bringing in really good players in the draft. And, I mean, they got a good build going here. I like the core that they put together. And if Will Levis plays well this year and that defense, you know, the stars come out and they play well to what I'm expecting them to, they could very easily, you know, take some games that people don't expect them to take, finish 9-8, and I'd be happy with that if I were a Titans fan for sure. Where I'm looking at them is probably 7-10. That's kind of, I don't think they're quite going to be at that 6-11 level. I just don't see a whole lot of consistency in Will Levis is the main thing. Like, there's going to be flashes. Like you saw last year, there were flashes throughout the course of last season. But there were always those lows, and I think you're going to have a good amount of those lows again this year when it's all said and done. I just feel like 7-10. That's kind of just the spot for them. Better than last year, not quite good enough to make that next jump. And where does Will Levis fall after all of this? If they finish 7-10, depends on how high they are in the draft, what the quarterback situation is looking like in the draft, but you can't feel great about that. You can't feel great about that if you're Will Levis and you're the organization looking at maybe him being the future of your franchise. But with that, that's my AFC South. Almost said North. We haven't done North yet. That's my AFC South preview. Got the Texans winning this damn thing. I got the Colts finishing just behind them and sneaking into the playoffs. So there you go. Thank you so much for tuning into Unqualified Analysis. That's it, folks. We're out of here. If you enjoyed this, go ahead, subscribe wherever you're listening to it. I'm talking YouTube. I'm talking Spotify. I'm talking Apple. I'm talking every platform you could think of that I've put it on. That's where it is. That's where it is. So go ahead, subscribe there, share it with a friend. Help me grow this damn thing a little bit. We need more growth. We need 10x mentality, folks. 10x mentality. We're trying to 10x this thing. So keep on sharing it. Keep on getting this thing going so we can, you know, maybe turn this thing into something one day. I think I've all but left that dream behind at this point. But hey, maybe we can all be pleasantly surprised at the end of this whole thing. So go ahead and do that. If you want to follow the socials, it'll be on the bottom left-hand corner. Right-hand corner as you're looking at it, my left. In the video, but it is at Caleb VUA on Twitters, unqualifiedanalysis@gmail.com for the email address. Either slide in my DMs on Twitter or hit me at the email address. Both will be down in the links in the description, so you can go check that shit out. Outside of that, thank you so much for tuning in to Unqualified Analysis. As always, I have got zero zilch, not a clue what I am talking about. One thing I learned this week, though, female black widow spiders are known to kill their mates after doing the deed, but that's actually not always true. It's true. It's true. Excuse me. It's true this often does happen, but it's not a uniform practice like with praying mantises. If you're a praying mantis and you're a man, your head's getting ripped off after sweet coital love. That's just simply going to happen. Not necessarily the case with the black widow spider. Maybe she's hungry on that day, and it is the case, but not always. At this point, I need to get this thing edited. Probably just going to edit this thing and go straight to sleep. But y'all have a good day. Y'all have a good night. Y'all have a good week. You have a good weekend. I will see y'all on next Tuesday talking about the NFC South. Deuces.